Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. In this channel, on this channel, I'm going to be focusing mostly on Call of Cthulhu. But one of the other things I want to do is to introduce you to other less well-known RPGs that you might also enjoy. So today we're going to be looking at Cthulhu Confidential by Pelgrane Press. So Pelgrane Press are more well known for ones like Night's Black Agents and also the famous Trail of Cthulhu, both of which use the Gumshoe system. I will have reviews coming up for both of these systems. Cthulhu Confidential is a little bit different. It uses the Gumshoe 1-to-1 system. So in this game, it's a 1-to-1 game. So there's one game master, or GM, and one player. Most horror stories, especially Lovecraft, have only one protagonist. So this can really ramp up the horror and the intensity of it. As the name suggests, confidential. This is a hard-boiled, private eye, noir-style detective game with potential mythos influence as well. So let's have a look at it now. So the book itself is broken up into 4 main sections, plus plenty of appendices as well. First, they explain the rules to you, and the rules are very, very simple as well. And then after that, there's a little bit talking about Cthulhu, the Cthulhu Mythos, if you don't know about it. And after that, there is a section on GMing 1-to-1 games. So this is a unique style of RPG, and this setting is made for just 1-to-1. So they give some advice on how to run that. After that, there are 3 scenarios which we'll talk about later. So first, there are the rules. There's an overview of the game mechanics, which is very, very simple. All forms of Gumshoe are more focused on the storytelling and narrative, the role-playing, rather than on the mechanics. So similar to Trail of Cthulhu and Call of Cthulhu, you have many abilities, and these are divided into investigate. So we'll have a look here at the sample character. Here we have Vivian Sinclair. So she has some investigative abilities and some general abilities. For investigative abilities, if you have the ability, assess honesty. If you have the ability, history. If you have the ability and you look in the right place, or you apply it in the right situation, you will get the information. The idea behind all Gumshoe is that finding the clues is not the exciting part. It's looking at all the clues and putting them together to make sense. That's unraveling the mystery like that. For example, if you think of a famous detective show like a Sherlock Holmes or a Poirot, if they missed a key piece of information, it might derail the whole situation. But it's the having all the clues in front of you and figuring it out from that, which is the idea behind Gumshoe. So naturally, you don't have all of the skills. So you will have specialist contacts that can help you with various knowledge. This actually really helps with the whole theme of this being a noir movie. And it can also help relieve some of the intensity of a 1-to-1 game by having a friendly, helpful chat. On the other hand, general abilities are for attempting other actions, not so much investigative actions. You will have 1 or 2 dice per skill. So here we can see in our sample character, she has 1 dice in athletics, cool, disguise, driving, but 2 dice in fighting. So this means you roll that number of 6-sided dice, or d6, to get your result either between 1 and 6 or 2 and 12. You don't have to roll so often, and you only roll if the GM tells you to. They give advice as well here. As a GM, don't have them roll for everything, only when succeeding and or failing could lead to interesting developments. So for example, if they're driving down the road, there's no roll involved. There are generally 3 types of results: advance, hold, and setback based on your dice result. Advance will be the best outcome, and setback will be the worst. Hold could be a success or a failure, but to a lesser degree than advance or setback. And sometimes when you get an advance, you will get an edge card, which gives you some future or ongoing advantage. Usually this happens if you get an advance. If you get a setback, so the worst result, you'll often get a problem card, which will give you some future or ongoing disadvantage. And you'll usually start each scenario with a problem card to add a bit of drama and personality to your character. So let's look at a sample one. This is not a spoiler. This is the sample one, which is not connected to any of the scenarios. But let's just see how this works. So, sneaking into Jimmy Horgan's joint. Wow. So this here is a stealth skill. You can see that if I get a roll of 8 or more, I get in and out unseen. So that's the best result. If I get between a 4 and a 7, I get a mediocre result. And if I get a 3 or less, then that is my worst result. Here, it needs an advance of 8 or more. And I'm pretty sure that you can't get... so each contest, each challenge, is designed for a specific scenario with a specific character in general. So usually you won't get something that's impossible for you to do. Let's imagine this character has 2 stealth dice. So I will roll my d6, and you always roll 1 at a time. So I got a 4 on my first roll. And I'll roll 1 more time, and I got another 4. So my score was 8. That means that I get an advance here. So the GM, only the GM sees this, but the GM does tell the player what they're what they're aiming for. So after that, the GM will paraphrase this in some way. You get in and out of Horgan's joint unseen with the contents of the file folders in Horgan's desk. Kicks off the scene, file folder below. So that'll lead us to the next scene. Gain edge, 3 blackmail photos. So I snuck in and I managed to get the blackmail photos. So the GM will hand me this card here, blackmail photos, and it gives me some advantage. Sometimes it's specifically related to this plot, and sometimes it's just some kind of generic advantage. Blackmail photos would be a very specific advantage. If I had scored a 7 or a 4 to 7, you realize that Horgan's men pay much more attention than you'd like to the door you want to sneak through. You can leave without their realizing you are casing the joint, but you'll have to figure out some other way to get that file. So I realize I can't get in this way, but nothing bad happened to me. If, however, I scored a 3 or less, Horgan's men confront you. Spend a push on a suitable interpersonal ability, or they take you out to the alley to make with brass knuckles. They're going to beat me up. So this time there was no penalty if I got the lowest result, because it gives me another chance to get out of it with interpersonal skill. But when you are rolling, let's say because you know what your goal is, maybe I'm happy enough just to stick with a hold. But let's say I want to get higher. There's 2 ways that I can get more dice to roll. One is by getting rid of an edge card that I already have. So this is a reward if I do this, but in a previous challenge, if I have an edge card, I can now discard that, and then I have 1 extra die to roll in this challenge. Alternatively, I could decide to take on an extra problem. Not every challenge allows that, but most of them do. The idea is that you're taking on future problems to help you overcome this problem. In this example, in this challenge, the extra problem 7, they're onto you. So Horgan and McShane suspect that you might be poking into their illegal affairs. They might take action against you if they see you again. Until you win back their trust, possibly with a reassurance push, you can't make other interpersonal pushes on them. So I would gain an extra die here, which might get me up to level 8, or to a score of 8. But the result is that Horgan and McShane now, they don't know, they didn't necessarily see me, but they suspect me, so it'll be difficult for me to interact with them in the future. But I got an extra dice to roll here. So you can discard an edge and gain an extra problem if the challenge allows it for each challenge. So you could potentially have your 2 original dice plus an additional 2. And one more thing is that when you are rolling dice, you will always roll 1 at a time. The reason for this is if you have multiple dice and you get up to an advanced score without rolling all of your dice, you will get a push. So a push is a special ability where you can get extra information or an extra advantage in certain circumstances. These are usually suggested to the GM in the scenario. For example, an assess honesty will let you know if the other person is telling the truth or not. But if you use a push, you might be able to guess the motivation behind the lie as well. So he's lying because he's trying to protect someone. So using that push can get you a little bit of extra information. You start the game with 4 pushes, and you gain them, as I said before, from achieving advances in challenges without rolling all of your dice. Yeah. Now, another thing about challenges is fights. Fights are also handled in challenges. They're usually just reduced to 1 challenge and possibly multiple connecting challenges, but generally a fight will be 1 roll of a dice or 1 set of rolling of a dice. There's the general assumption that the player character won't die except possibly at the conclusion of the story. This really helps build up the story because it's just a 1-to-1 situation. There's no other player character who can come in and help them really. So it's not so much fun for a player playing this game to suddenly die. Whereas if they die after uncovering the mystery and they understand, then it's maybe a sad ending, but it's a satisfying ending as well, that they uncovered the mystery. Dying in the middle of it is not so satisfying. So that's what they wanted to have here. Now, they do have a mention, if players are acting completely recklessly because they know that they're invincible, you can kill them off during the game. But there's a general assumption, if both the player and the GM are buying into the system, that they won't die until the end of the game, possibly. They might obviously survive. So let's look at a fight and how that is resolved. So here we have, and again, this is not a spoiler. This is an example fight from the book. It's not taken from any of the scenarios in the book. So here we have a deep 1 fight, and it's run the exact same way as a regular challenge. We can see here the skill involved is fighting. So we'll assume that this person has 2 dice in fighting, just for sake of argument, and I'll roll them here. I got a 1, not so good, and a 5. So my score is now 6. So I'm currently in the hold situation. Again, you know what scores you're aiming for to get setback, hold, or advance, but you don't know what an advance or a hold would mean. Let's say, for example, I know I just need any other result, just 1 more point to push me up to an advance. So I'm going to take on an extra problem here. I'm going to roll, and I got a 2, which brings me up to an 8. So I'll get this advance. The deep 1 flees, shrieking, and dives back into the sea cave. You gain access to the secret grotto with half an hour before any of its fellow creatures show up. Gain edge 8, fish cutting blade. So this card will now be given to me, and it gives me an advantage there. But I also took the problem, the extra problem, to get that extra die. You have been slashed by the frog-like claw of a deep 1. It hurts like hell, and a weird liquid seeps from the wound. You'd better take that get that taken care of. -2 on all general physical tests, and -1 on all general manual tests until you take time to counter this card. So taking time is a way that you can deal with some of the problems that just might need time. For example, an injury might just need time to heal. Or you might need time to rest from a particularly insanity-inducing scene. But a lot of the time, this will allow the villains in the scene or the other characters to advance their plot, which might make it worse for you. There's this balancing act to take care of. And that is basically what it is for challenges. It's quite simple, really. In the next section, so that is the rules of the game, more or less. There are a couple of other things, such as like mythos things, but generally that's what it is. So in the next section, this is introducing the Cthulhu Mythos for you. So there's a brief bit here about H.P. Lovecraft himself and cosmic horror, just explaining what that is. What's very, very nice here is they have a breakdown of a number of key Lovecraftian stories, and it's a really short, just kind of like a description you'd find on the back of the book, but it just kind of gives some key information. So if you don't know any Lovecraft, have a quick read through this and see if there are any of the stories that sound interesting to you. Some of them will maybe pique your interest and others not so much. So choose the ones that you think, oh, that sounds interesting, and give that a read. So it's great. There's a little thing here. The color out of space, in which a meteor lands on a family farm emitting an unknown radiation that slowly destroys its inhabitants. Great, you've got the general idea of that. After that, which I think is really great, it goes through some themes and motifs in cosmic horror, in Lovecraftian horror, just to kind of give you an update without you having to read the entire canon, which is quite sizable. So this is just a quick, the secret truths, you're not who you are, and knowledge brings doom. So the more you look into something, the more you'll find things that you don't want to know. After that, really useful again is there is a list and a short description of 10 gods here, 10 of the Cthulhu Mythos gods, we'll call them gods. Azathoth, Cthulhu, Dagon, some elder gods, Hastur, Nyarlathotep, Shub-Niggurath, Tsathoggua, Yig, and Yog-Sothoth. So again, just giving you that, like, enough information to have a vague idea about what they are, and in each scenario then, if and when they come up, you'll know, enough about them. If you want to read more, of course, there's a lot more that you can read. And similarly, after that, there's also a section about monsters and aliens that you might come across. For example, in the previous test, in the previous fight, there was talk about deep ones. What if you don't know what a deep one is? Well, then there is a brief description here to give you enough information to run the game if that was coming up. The only thing is, in all Lovecraftian games, ghouls. I find it very difficult to add ghouls into the game because both I and some of my players love It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Charlie Kelly has ruined the horror of ghouls.
Alright, what are some of your likes?
Ghouls.
Son of a bitch, what are you talking about now?
Funny little green ghouls.
What? Like in movies and cartoons? What?
Little green ghouls, buddy.
Don't write ghouls.
I'm not.
I'm putting travel. Jesus Christ, what are you...
So finally, after talking about a few of the monsters, there's quite a short part here about different tomes, such as the Necronomicon, the Book of Ebon, and Nameless Cults, or Unaussprechlichen Kulten. So yeah, just a very nice brief overview there. In the next section, we have a bit of a GM guide, and this gives you some advice about how to run it and includes some anecdotes about playtesting. It suggests how to use sources. So sources, in case you've forgotten, these are non-player characters who know the investigator or the private eye, and can help them with maybe some skills that the player character doesn't have. So they might go to see a forensic scientist or something like that to get some more information, or a chemist to analyze some material they've found. So it gives a little bit of advice on how to use them, and also how to create scenarios and create investigators. One key aspect of Cthulhu Confidential unique to this is creating challenges here. So there's a good description on how to create challenges, followed by, if you'll excuse me for a second. So there's some information here, and then it is followed by, there's a good list here, but then it's followed by many examples, which is really great. So it's giving you the advice how to make it, and then giving you actual examples of it as well, so you can see it in action. After that, there is an excellent page on page 299 here. I'm sorry. 301, close enough. And this is something that you can give to your players to help them understand how best to conduct investigations. So I would give this out to the player in advance of the game and just have it on the table there, or have it in front of them when they're playing. Just sometimes they might get a little bit stuck and they might not know where to go, and this really helps them get into the mindset of noir investigation. So really helpful there. So in the GM guide section, there are two things that really stick out to me. They say many times that the focus for Cthulhu Confidential is more about preparation on the GM side and less about improvisation. So you want to prepare the scenes and the interactions well in advance to suit the player character. This absolutely does not mean that there will be no improvisation, but it may seem a little bit more railroady than some other than some other RPGs, and more railroady than some players might want. I think the railroadiness of it is more evident on the GM side than on the player side, because the player does have many routes to kind of get through it. But the nature of a mystery is that there is a start and an end, and just a few ways to pick up the information. But yeah, it says preparation is very important here, and I would agree. There's also a very nice part written into the rules, which I love. At the end of each scenario, the player takes a little bit of time to construct an emotional coda to wrap up the session. This is like a voiceover at the end of a film noir, as the camera pans out on your investigator. This is really thematic, as the player kind of looks down at, some problems that they still have, and also reflects on the scenario as well. And this reflection is very powerful. In the academic field of simulation and simulation training, they say reflection is where the learning happens. So that's where you really get that great connection. And as you've seen, I'm sure with experienced game masters in other role-playing games, they have a bit of a reflection at the end of a scenario or at the end of a campaign to look back on it. But I really like that it's put straight into the rules here. It's built into the rules, and that's how you end a game. I think it's a very cathartic way to end, whether it has a happy ending or a sad ending. Okay, so after that in the book we have 3 scenarios. This book is a great resource. Not only do we have the 3 great scenarios themselves, but each scenario comes with various details, or a very detailed setting location and a great character background. This video will have no spoilers, but I will have a spoiler review of the different scenarios for GMs only. Players, don't watch that, coming up soon. The format in it is mostly the same. We get a breakdown of the character themselves and decent sections for each of the sources. you can give this information to the players in advance. And the information on the main character themselves is vague enough that the player can kind of fill that out from the skeleton. But the sources are a little bit more fleshed out with pictures included. And this is more than enough that you would need for the sources, just to provide that information and possibly some nice banter as a bit of a relief from the tension of the main campaign. There are also some suggestions about books and movies and stuff like that that you might want to read or watch before playing one of these scenarios, just to get you kind of right in the mood, to get that tone right. And I always appreciate this when they give you some advice, what tone the author of the scenario is imagining for this. It can really help set the mood very well. So then, after looking at the character, and so I'm not showing it now just to avoid any potential spoilers, but then after that we'll get a description of the city at the time of the scenario. So we have LA, hard-boiled LA, we have hard-boiled New York, and we also have wartime Washington, DC. So yeah, those are really good, and they're fleshed out quite well. We get key locations in the city and also key characters at the time. I believe that all the characters are, or at least some of the characters are real life people, like for example in LA, some real life gangsters. Some people love having real life characters in it, and some people don't like having it in their fiction. I think that it's in the setting scenario anyway, it's definitely fine to just have that information, to know the background, and to maybe have them as background figures in scenarios, not main antagonists, but to each their own. And this gives you the freedom to get, like, obviously you could just change someone's name and there you go. And then just before that, before we move on to the scenario, for the city breakdown, we also get a number of scenario seeds based on the places and on the people. So this is really useful because each Washington, LA, and New York, each of them has only one scenario in this book built for this investigator or this character. And if you want to play more with this character, this book gives you just little scenario seeds there that you might be able to develop yourself. If you are looking for more, there is an upcoming release for Cthulhu Confidential. I believe it's called Even Death Can Die, which has 3 more scenarios for each of the 3 investigators in this. So 3 more in LA with Rex, I think Dex maybe. 3 more with, I want to say Vivian in LA, and 3 more with Langston in Washington. And that's that. So that is the end of Cthulhu Confidential. I think this is a really welcome addition to the Mythos TRPG or TTRPG, tabletop role-playing game library. Many people's biggest complaint in playing role-playing games is that they can't find enough people to play, or there's no one around them who likes to play. This solves both of those issues because you only need one other person to play with you, and it's very easy to play online. Sometimes for larger groups it can be a little bit difficult to get the balance right in online games, but when it's one-to-one, online play I think is fantastic. The rules are incredibly simple. Basically what I would tell my players is just describe what you're doing, and if something comes up, if there's a need for you to roll your dice, I'll let you know. And all you have to do is, all you need is 1d6, and just roll it one at a time, and then we'll talk about the results. If you buy Cthulhu Confidential, you get all of the problem cards as individual files, and the whole PDF as well, if you buy it directly from Pelgrane Press, which I would recommend. And so the book has a great background and 3 very interesting scenarios. So you can really cut your teeth on these scenarios before maybe going on and making your own. And even before you try to make your own totally original ones, it does give you some seeds that you might want to start your own ones. So good points about this. Rules light, very easy to get into. There's some preparation to do as the game master, but the player can come in knowing next to nothing. I think it is probably good to give the players the character detail in advance so they can kind of read through it and learn about the context, but they could just pick it up right at the end. All of the explanations are very simple and very clear. There are a lot of examples as well, which I really appreciate. There's good advice for players. Excuse me. Actually, this handout that I still have open here, this I think is great to maybe help them overcome some problems that they're having. It seems to have been playtested a lot. There's a list of playtesters at the start, and there's notes throughout based on what happened during playtesting, which I always appreciate. I think it really helps game masters to prepare for what might come up. And the settings that they give you for New York, LA, and Washington, wartime Washington, are really deep, so that there's a lot that you can do with it from here. And it also gives you little seed ideas to continue those adventures as you see fit. The bad points are few enough. There are a number of typos throughout this. It doesn't really affect anything, like there's no misunderstanding, but maybe just another pass through by an editor or spell checker or something like that would have helped. Basically, there are no handouts in the game apart from the problems and edges. I think in an investigative game it helps with the setting as well if there are handouts, but not to worry. There are also no character portraits or NPC for the NPCs apart from the sources. So the scientist that you know and you can consult has a portrait, but the people involved in the scenario don't have a portrait. So for example, if you're going after a missing girl, for example, you don't get a photo of her or a picture of her to kind of go around asking. Similarly, in the example that we gave earlier about breaking into someone's place and getting the blackmail photos, there was no, printout or no picture of the blackmail photos. If there were a confession or a missing letter, you don't get any of those at all. I guess it keeps it simple, but I think it could have helped thematically. And obviously the GM can throw this in as well. It is maybe just a little bit prep heavy. As I say, the focus is on preparation, not improvisation. So there's a little bit of work for the GM to do, but yeah, not that bad. And finally, there's just a couple of slightly confusing inconsistencies in the scenario layout. I'll talk about them more in the individual videos for each of the game, each of the scenarios, so as to avoid spoilers, but it's just a little bit off-putting, and I think if they could fix that for the upcoming Even Death May Die, I think that would help a lot. Overall, in this game, I would definitely recommend buying it. Also because it's one-to-one, it works both, as I mentioned before, it works really well both in person and online. If you think it sounds interesting, I would say definitely check it out. And as I said before, if you want to know more about the adventures within it, I will be posting videos about them soon too. If you are a player, you can watch maybe the first quarter of the videos where I talk about the character and the city locations, but please don't watch the actual scenario breakdown. I'll put up a spoiler warning before, but you will ruin the fun for yourself. So that's all from me. How about you? Have you played Cthulhu Confidential? What did you think about it? If I've missed anything or if I've forgotten anything, just pop it down in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Take it easy.